Story number 1. Allow me to set the stage for this. I was 19 at the time this took place. I was a Marine, and I was on my first deployment to Afghanistan. Not too far from my platoon's patrol base, 3 to 6 kilometers or so, was this structure that looked like a castle. Through interpreted conversations with locals, we were able to determine that they believed it had been built by Alexander the Great. Whether that was true or not, I will never know. But let me tell you, this place looked ancient. So, being Marines, we did the only thing we thought was prudent at the time. We went out on a patrol with the intent of setting up an OP inside this structure. We took our Afghan border police with us. When we got close to the structure and our Afghans figured out what we were up to, they refused to go any further. Before they left, they kept repeating the same word over and over. Don't ask me to remember what it was, this was a decade ago, and there's no way I can recall it. But what I do know now is they were trying to warn us of evil spirits. We went in anyway, without our Afghans, with the intent of staying there overnight. This place was basically an ancient fort, with mud-clay brick walls on 4 sides and a building in the middle. So, we set security, made sure we had comm checks with our patrol base, and they had an updated position report on us, so they knew where we were in case we got into trouble. Darkness fell. Not too long after, I went up to take my turn on the wall with my friend, to watch for anyone that might be trying to sneak up on us, and any other Taliban-related shenanigans. Not 20 minutes into our shift was when weird stuff started going down. The entire time I was on the wall, I felt watched, from all sides. I turned to see a figure walking along the wall, not far from where we were sitting. I saw it walking. It was a robed figure that looked to be almost floating. I turned to my friend to see if he saw it too, and he said he did. But when he got his night vision back on, it was his turn to rest. The figure was gone. We didn't see anything else after that for the rest of our shift. We uneasily finished and went to rest, where I ended up dozing off at some point. I don't know what happened next, but I awoke to a completely black figure, literally squatting on my chest. When I went to yell for help, nothing came out, and it felt like I had a hand over my mouth. I reached for my knife. I was a machine gunner and couldn't just grab my machine gun. And I felt like something was pinning my arm to the ground. I tried to squirm free, but I couldn't move. So I bit down, hard as I could, on what felt like a hand over my mouth. At that point, whatever weight was on me instantly disappeared, and I could move and talk again. I was freaking out, and my brothers who were around me saw me. My training kicked in, and I was trying my best to keep quiet and not pass out, because I was hyperventilating. My squad mates calmed me down. After I told them what happened, they all admitted to having the creeps, and the feeling of being watched the whole time we were there. None of us could sleep. We all basically sat back to back for the rest of the night when we weren't on watch. We were pretty freaked out, and every noise and rustle of the wind made it even worse than the total silence of that ancient fort, in that ancient desert. If you haven't experienced the silence of an open desert, in a part of the world where there is absolutely zero light and noise pollution, then I suppose it's hard to appreciate how any noise, in a place like that, in the middle of the night, in total darkness. When you're already alert for sounds of the enemy. And now you're on even higher alert from something you can't understand. It's just about the scariest thing anyone can ever experience. I'll never experience that kind of fear again in my life. Ever. To finish quickly. As soon as the sun came up, we left. Everybody was scared shitless, and none of us ever spoke about it again to each other. We never went back to that area again. And I still suffer from nightmares and sleep paralysis because of my personal experience that night. The scariest part of this whole thing? I wonder if it was just in my head. Story number 2. I was in my 20s at the time, young and full of ambition. At the time, I was a raging alcoholic and drug addict. So my memory is kind of hazy, and I do apologize if details aren't there, or if major events are left out. Now, I've been sober for almost a year. Anyway, I moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, from Arizona. And I had gotten a job as a service tech. One of the jobs I went on was adding devices for equipment on a string of gas stations. Starting from St. George to Salt Lake, slowly working my way up the state to Salt Lake City, hitting every store that needed devices. I can't remember exactly where I was for the life of me. Somewhere between Richfield and another town, one of those small towns in between. I had finished a store late, around 10 or 11 p.m., and wanted to get to the next town over so I could continue my work in the morning, rather than drive 2 hours at dawn. As I was driving down the highway, Google Maps told me to take a dirt road to get to the next town I was working in. Hesitant about why this was even a route, I turned left onto it. It was a long dirt road with nothing around me, pitch black darkness, other than my high beams. About 5 to 7 minutes into the drive, my truck made a sputtering sound. It was an old 2008 work truck. Piece of crap. I cursed under my breath and put it in park. I lifted the hood, but nothing seemed to be wrong. I have mild mechanic knowledge, and even that didn't help. Of course, I looked down at my phone, no cell service at all. I checked my work phone, same thing. My only option here was to either wait it out until daylight, or walk until I could find a spot with at least one bar of service. So, I took option 2. Also, I usually carry firearms, but on this trip, I had forgotten to bring them with me. Wielding a 10-inch pipe wrench and a walkie flashlight, I walked into the desert, determined to be rescued from the dark abyss. I'd like to add, this road was barely a road. You wouldn't even take a truck down it unless you absolutely had to, or it led to a specific point. I wouldn't even call it a road, more like a trail. Brush and trees lined both sides like a natural wall. I'm not anxious or easily scared. I grew up in Arizona, so I'm pretty used to the dark, quiet desert. But every step further from the truck made me feel worse. I walked for about 10 minutes. Until I heard laughing. Kind of muffled laughing, something you'd hear in a kid's show, right behind me. I swung around quickly. Nothing. My boots sank into the soft mounds of sand as I pushed forward, fast. My heart was beating out of my chest like a ticking time bomb. Then I heard it again, but this time, closer. Louder. Like it was only 4 or 5 feet from me. I was fully sprinting into the desert now, dodging brush and sand. My flashlight was darting around like laser beams, searching for somewhere to hide. I don't believe in the paranormal, or aliens, or anything like that. I just figured it was some deranged desert hobo or drug addict. Adrenaline was coursing through me. I hid behind a nearby rock, crouched down. My right knee hurt from the sharp ground, but I didn't care. I needed to hide. The rock was one of those 3-foot-tall mounds, just enough to give me cover. The moon was shining bright, so I could see some things. As I scanned the desert, I saw the silhouettes of 2 people running. I could barely make them out, but my eyes had adjusted to the darkness. I forgot to mention. After running for a while, I had turned my flashlight off so I wouldn't give away my location. I heard them talking, but I was far enough away that I couldn't make out the words. I literally sent out a message to my family and friends, telling them I loved them, and I was sorry for anything I'd done wrong in life. Of course, it didn't send. I had no service. Just me, coping, in a traumatic event. I'm not a small guy. I'm 5 feet 10 inches, 230 pounds. But I was unarmed, and I was outnumbered. God knows how many others were out there with them, and what they were planning to do when they found me, helpless. I waited. But they didn't leave the general area where they had stopped. They were scrambling around like mosquitoes. I had to think, and fast. I thought of the only thing I could do. I grabbed 2 small rocks. I'm not religious, but I prayed to God that night and threw them far in a direction away from the truck and the road. I heard them scurry away toward the noise, shouting at each other as they trucked through the desert. I slowly crouch-walked through the brush, back to the truck. I forgot to mention this earlier, but I heard another set of stomping after the 2 had run. I never confirmed a third person in the desert with me. As I got closer, I could see the truck. I felt like I was in heaven. Every step was closer to salvation. My boots filled with sand with every stomp into the soft, cold ground. Branches and brush stabbed at my cargo work pants. I could hear them tailing me, but I didn't dare turn around. I didn't even care to see who or what it was chasing me. I saw the truck. The driver's side door was completely open. I had left it closed. I checked the back seat and flung the door open wider. I flew into the driver's seat and did the stupidest thing ever, but it was all I could think of. I started the engine. It took a couple of tries to crank, but finally it let out a roar. I slammed the gear shifter into drive and floored it. As I sped down that dirt road, I saw hooded people hiding along the sides of the road. They ducked as I drove by, scattering into the darkness like cockroaches in a kitchen. I rolled down the window and hurled my pipe wrench as hard as I could at one of them. Then I sped off. I screamed into the pitch-dark desert night. Dust trails followed behind the truck. Silence. Nothing but me and my heavy breathing, trying to make sense of the whole situation. I drove until I saw the town lights. I was sweating, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, my teeth clenched, going at least 75 miles per hour. I pulled into a small town around midnight and threw myself into a local 7-Eleven. I looked terrified. The cashier asked me what was wrong. I just told her to call the sheriff's office. The sheriff was some old, burly-looking man. I'm covered in tattoos from head to toe, so he treated me like I might be a criminal. Turns out a hose had blown. I don't remember exactly what it was. I called my boss, who was upset about the late-night call. He was shocked when I told him what happened. He told me to call the sheriff's office and a mechanic. The mechanic was super nice. He didn't even charge me for the repair. The cops weren't much help. They looked at me like I had been up too long or was hallucinating, but I wasn't. They asked if I'd taken any drugs or had been drinking. They barely wrote anything in the report. The mechanic told me he had never heard of anything like that happening in the area. I stayed in a motel that night. I think it was a Motel 6, but I can't remember. I swear I didn't get a lick of sleep after I showered the dirt off me. I ended up returning home early and quit that job later on for other reasons. I've since moved out of Utah and now live in Florida. A photo I had taken on the service call reminded me of this story. I had to write about it. I had to tell someone. Was this a robbery? Were they trying to hurt me? Did they see the work truck and think, ooh, expensive tools and copper? I have no idea. I'm just curious, who do you think those people were? Why were they hunting me like an animal? Has anyone had a similar experience? How close do you think I was to being murdered in the desert? Story number 3. This is my day to have fun. Leave us alone. Besides, I wasn't really a stranger to angry, shouting men, even at that age. Unfortunate, but true. I think the lack of reaction irritated the man. Or maybe this was his plan the entire time. He swiftly pulls into our lane and essentially forces us off the road and onto the shoulder. My mom does her best to maintain control of the car and avoid contact with the other vehicle, but that's pretty much impossible. The unmistakable crunch of metal rings out, and both vehicles come to a stop again on the side of a desert freeway. Not exactly anyone around to help out, or places to go. Mom checks me to see if I'm okay and remains in her seat. Now, if I were her, I don't know if I would have waited to confront this man with a child in my car after that stunt. However, my mom has, and always will be, the tough-as-nails type who isn't afraid of anything, especially when she feels she's been wronged. And of course, she had no idea what was about to happen next. In a flash of anger and cursing, the man is at the driver's side door screaming about the damage to his car. He howls that it was caused by food trash flying out of our convertible, landing on his windshield and blocking his view. He starts demanding compensation and tells my mom to get out of the car and come look at his vehicle. At this point, my mom refuses to get out. She points at a call box a fair distance away, remember those, and says it's best to call the cops and let them handle this. Definitely not the answer the man wanted. In one fluid movement, the man grabs the back of my mother's head and, once, twice, 3 times, smashes it into the steering wheel, leaving her unconscious. Lifting her like a sack of potatoes, he drops her on the side of the road and jumps into the driver's seat. The keys are still in the ignition, and he starts the car up. I haven't even reacted yet. I think I was in an absolute state of shock. It wasn't until I felt the car moving, getting back on the road, that I registered what had happened. And when it hit me hard. I went ballistic. I was no longer just annoyed with this man, I was furious for what he did. I remember holding my stuffed Simba by the tail as I climbed out of my seat, screaming and whipping the man in the face, trying to blind him. My battle cry, I'll always remember, was, "You're the meanest man in the whole world." I clawed and kicked, giving no care to what was going to happen to me. This man was going to pay. This led to a couple of things happening. First, I made it impossible to drive the car safely, and he ended up crashing into another shoulder. Second, by this time, people had started to notice. A woman lying on the shoulder. A convertible with a Tasmanian devil of a 5-year-old beating up on some creeper. They began to alert authorities. I don't remember too much after that. I remember the cops coming, sitting in the back of a police cruiser. They gave me a teddy bear and asked me a lot of questions. My grandma picked me up. My mom went to the hospital, where she thankfully didn't have any major injuries, just a busted nose and some whiplash. I never made it to my cousin's party. And I never saw that white convertible again. I'll always be thankful for my main man Simba having my back through all of that. I don't know what that man's intentions were. Looking back, and knowing the area we lived in, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if drugs played a major part in all of this. Story number 4. I was so worried about other things that I never did pay attention to the name of the town. But there were only about 6 streets in the whole place. I gas up, and I'm ready to get back on the road. Except, I cannot for the life of me find my way back to the highway. I circle the town about 4 times, getting more and more frustrated. This was such a tiny town, how the heck could I not find my way out? I could literally see the highway, but I couldn't get to it. I returned to the gas station to ask for directions. Now, when I got gas earlier, I paid at the pump and never went inside. When I enter the store for directions, there's a skinny, nondescript guy behind the counter. He has black hair hanging in front of his eyes that looks like it could use a good wash. He's not particularly creepy, but definitely a little rude. He never really meets my eyes. Just keeps looking down at a magazine. He gives me directions that don't sound right at all. He tells me to take a road that'll get me to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment, I'm dumbfounded. I point out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town, why so far to get back? I can literally see the highway from the edge of town. He stays casual, like I'm just an annoyance and can follow his directions or not. Why should he care? He gives me some half-hearted explanation about the road curving around, but it doesn't make sense. Still not looking at me. Just shrugs like, whatever. I gave you your directions. And waves his hand toward the door. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling. My heart was racing, seemingly for no reason. I get into the truck, and as soon as I put the key into the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling. No matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. I didn't know what he had in mind, but I knew one thing for sure. There was no way I was going to follow his directions. But this was the only store in this tiny town. Short of knocking on random doors, which, no thank you, there was no one else to ask. I decided I didn't give a damn if this town seemed like something dropped out of the Twilight Zone. I was going to drive around until I found my own way out, even if it took all damn night. Then, a big red beater of a pickup truck pulls into the lot. As much rust as metal. And out steps the quintessential Texan man, huge, husky, in flannel and work boots. Without even thinking, I jump out of my truck and approach him quickly, though a little wary. I look into his eyes, and thank God, I see a kind human being. Or at least, I hope I do. I ask if he can please give me directions to the highway. I tell him I know it's silly, but I just can't seem to find my way back. He looks concerned, probably because I was visibly upset. So he makes me laugh, and cheerfully gives me directions. He tells me about a hidden turnoff, right at the end of a small concrete tunnel I had passed several times. He says it often confuses travelers because it's so hard to see. They really need to put up a sign or something, he jokes. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I ask how many miles it is back to the highway. He laughs and gives me a funny look. Miles? Miss, I'd say it's a quarter mile, at most. You can see the highway right from here. At that point, I couldn't help it. I had to know. I told him the directions the man in the store had given me. The Texan looked at me very intently. Then he asked how I even knew about that route. He said it was pretty far out, and usually only locals knew about it. So I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes. Then he asked what the attendant looked like. He also asked if I had a map of the state. Nope, just my MapQuest printout, which wasn't helpful in this situation. He went to his truck and grabbed a raggedy local map from his glove box. He spread it out for me and traced the route I described. The way the man from the gas station had told me to go led away from town, away from the interstate, and into what seemed like the middle of nowhere. The man told me that the road did go about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked what was out there. He told me it was nothing but some junk cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics. And those were the nice things townspeople had to say about them. The shady gas station clerk was part of this family and lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in this man's eyes as he told me this. He also told me I was smart to listen to my instincts. He warned me to be careful traveling out here. I don't know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in the back of my U-Haul, or what was in the driver's seat. But thankfully, I didn't have to find out. Oh, and I learned that sometimes angels look like ruddy-haired Texans with scruffy faces and rusty pickups. So, thank you, random Texan stranger. You really saved my ass, and I will always remember you with tons of love. Story number 5. Let me preface this by saying I'm not claiming this was any particular phenomenon. I'm telling you exactly what happened, no exaggeration or lying of any kind. So, on to what happened. 20 years ago, my brother and I, 19 and 15 at the time, were working a landscaping job in northern Arizona. We had gotten off work at the site around 7 p.m. We hopped into his truck and started the 45-minute commute home. On the way back, there was a dirt road that led about 20 miles into the middle of the desert. It's mainly used for dirt bikes or four-wheeling, but we used it as a good spot to stop and smoke weed while avoiding prying eyes. So, we drove a few miles in and parked between two hills that hid the truck and us pretty well. We'd done this about 30 times before, though never again after that night. We stopped, and I began breaking up the weed to roll. He was talking about something, but I wasn't really listening until I heard his voice change. "Did you hear that?" he asked. We both listened, and I heard a strange high-pitched tiny sound for a split second, then suddenly, complete silence. The desert is actually a pretty loud place at night. I remember realizing that when the sound was gone. As we sat there for maybe 5 more seconds, my brother gasped, started the truck, and floored it in rapid succession. We were flying out of the desert now, and I was bouncing like a ball from his reckless driving. I asked him, "What the heck, man?" He said nothing. We hit the street, and the lights of a passing car showed his face. He was pale and completely wide-eyed with his mouth open. I got scared seeing so much fear from him and just sat there waiting for him to stop. He finally stopped at a McDonald's parking lot when we got back in town. He started crying. I just patted him on the shoulder and waited. After a few minutes, he asked me if I remembered. "Remember what, man?" We had been in the desert for like 5 minutes before he went flying out like a crazy person. He looked at me and started sobbing. He said it had me and he couldn't do anything. He said it took me. At this point, I started putting some things together. It was quiet out. No cars. I looked at one of those billboard clocks and saw that it was 11:11 p.m. My brother told me something had grabbed me through my closed passenger window. He had gone for his pistol when he suddenly froze and couldn't move. The thing told him that if he didn't stay right where he was and wait, I would die and he would be next. He said he felt it in his heart to be true. The thing that had me was very tall and thin with huge black eyes. He says he doesn't remember anything else about it, just tall and thin, with huge black eyes. He sat frozen in absolute terror for hours while the thing disappeared with me into the desert. And suddenly, I appeared in the truck. He gunned it out of there. Over the years, I've talked to him about it twice. He hates to even mention it. He's ashamed, I think, and still very afraid. He changed after this, always seeming less energetic and a little withdrawn. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish I could help. I told him he was blameless, and I thanked him for getting us out of there. That's all I could do. I had considered multiple times getting hypnotized to see if I could recover some memories, like I've heard other people do. But whenever I think about it, I remember the light flashing over his face and the sheer terror I saw there. Better not to know, I think.